Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to week 218 and video episode number 44 of Music is Not a Genre. Each week I take a release or two from my collection, I discuss them, I give you my take on them, I throw in some interesting information and connectivity to other music and to things in the world and to my music. If you like this podcast or any of the other content on my channel, please take a moment to subscribe and ding that bell. It means a lot to me. If you think there's someone out there you know who is a music obsessive the way I am, who has eclectic taste, who likes to really dive in and would enjoy this channel, please share this podcast or another video or the channel itself with them. It would mean a lot to me. Thank you. This is a very special week for a couple of reasons. One is, I have officially launched my Patreon page. Music is Not a Genre. Patreon.com/Music is Not a Genre, and the link is on my banner on this YouTube channel right here. And what that means is, well, a couple of things. Again, it means that the content here on the YouTube channel will remain, most of it, and my weekly or monthly output will be consistent, but will be different. I will still be sharing this particular podcast with you, Music is Not a Genre. My other podcast, Music is Everything, will now shift over to the Patreon page for patrons, for subscribers there. And at Patreon, you will also have exclusive access to special edition podcasts, such as I am starting an interview series very soon. I'll be interviewing other people in the music world or people about music. And it should be interesting. And performances connected to these podcasts. And so for as little as $5 a month to as much as $5,000 a month, you can support me, you can support Music is Not a Genre, you'll get my eternal thanks, probably a note as well, I believe. And like I said, some exclusive content. But in the meantime, most everything you see here on this channel will be here, and I appreciate you being here as well. The second reason this is an important week is that we are relaunching our t-shirt company, Snirk Shirts by Feek. We will have some new products, which I cannot show you yet because the launch hasn't happened. But one of the standard products will be this here white shirt. That's our signature t-shirt. And so that means that this area, or the area I normally record in, has been set up as a photography studio, so I don't have access to certain things, including my big screen. So I'm going to use these notes here and read them when I need them, which is a new phrase that I just made up. I'm making up new phrases this year, pretty much left and right. So that's my housekeeping notes. I hope you do check out the Patreon page. That would mean a lot to me. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. I'll let you know more about the t-shirt company as it comes, which will be very, very, very soon. So let's get to this week. So this week, right? The topic is why Southern rock might just be ideal America. And I'm using these two albums by Little Feat as a jumping off point for that. I think it's pretty timely. Because if you're watching this close to when I recorded, which is third week of November, I think, in 2020, we just had an election. And if you know anything about the election, you know that it indicates that our country is pretty divided. And it always is, but the divisiveness, I think, is a lot easier to spot now and a lot more frothy, let's say, volatile. And this podcast this week kind of ties into that, and you'll see why. But let's get to these albums first. Let's give you a little rundown of what they are. So the first one here, As Time Goes By, is a storm front here coming in from the east. As Time Goes By is a compilation of their greatest hits that was released in 1986. And Let It Roll was an album of theirs released in 1988. So that's about when I, got into these dudes. And interesting things about both of these albums that I didn't know until I researched them. One is that for this one here, As Time Goes By, I had trouble finding information on it, and a lot of the information I found was not correct. There were listings that said it was released in 93, 94, 2012, something like that. And I knew that couldn't be true because, well, A, I was really not into Southern rock and Little Feat in the 90s at that time. And B, I knew I owned these before then. So I did a little more research and found that it was indeed released in '86 and that it's a rarity. Apparently it's, there's a CD version that is also kind of rare, but not as rare. It's available. That is 20 tracks. It's expanded edition that was released in the 90s. But this vinyl is hard to find. So if you want it, dial me up, I'll name your price. That was interesting. And then the second thing is this. If you know anything about Little Feat, and I honestly don't know much, is they started in the late 60s, early 70s. They were in that whole Southern rock movement that started at the time with bands like, the Allman Brothers and ZZ Top and people like that, Lynyrd Skynyrd a year or two later. And they had a leader named Lowell George. Awesome voice, just an amazing voice, who died in 1979. They released an album shortly after that, I believe in '81, and I believe it had him on it. I think it was material they've been working on. I'm not sure about that. But they didn't release anything else in the '80s until this album here, when they found a new lead singer, and it turns out that this album was their comeback album after that period away and after the death of Lowell George. And it had a hit on it. It was a pretty big album for them. And it actually set off the whole second wave of their career, which I believe they're still in. So just two interesting things about these albums. Now, as you may have discerned from my talking so far, I'm not a Southern rock expert. I'm not really a Little Feat expert. I'm not even a giant, let's say, devoted fan of this kind of music. But there was a period when, hopefully all of us go through exploratory periods in music, and it's not just when we're young. We go through periods where we need that kind of comfort food or nostalgia or music we know and love or something close to that. But then hopefully we all go through periods where we're like, I need something new. I want to discover more. Well, at the time, having been brought up in the pop world, the jazz world, the blues world, the musical theater world, the rock world, I didn't know a lot about Southern rock. And I'm coming back to that point in just a little bit. Keep that in mind, that I didn't know a lot about Southern rock. But what I did know at the time were bands like Led Zeppelin, a band like Chicago, some New Orleans music, older, Dr. John type stuff, but even like brass band New Orleans and things like that. And those things in particular, the Led Zeppelin, Chicago, and the New Orleans music, were really the things that caused me to want to explore something more. And I started I'd heard in my whole childhood about Lynyrd Skynyrd. They were pretty much mentioned in the same breath as Led Zeppelin by a lot of people. So I'm like, I got to try them out. I like them. And I thought, well, I want more of this, but I also want something that has like a funkiness and a horn section. And boom, heard about Little Feat and went to them. And that was from that kind of the Chicago influence. And got into them right around when, I believe it might have been when this album came out. I don't really recall, but I know that obviously these are the two albums that I have, and I, delved into them. And so it was one of those tangential, I had music that I liked, and this was a nice step forward into something new. And that's something new. It kind of brings me back to the point of not knowing a lot about this music. I had assumed, because I believed in, a good pop song. I believed in funky music, jazz, blues, disco, dance, electronic dance, even techno and all of that. I believed in rock and roll, and if it's going to be rock and roll, then don't hold back, And so my notion, my prejudging of the Southern rock, not knowing a lot about it, it was that it was watered down rock. It was rock for country people who didn't want to get too hard. It was rock for hicks, made by hicks, and all this stuff, right? And it's the prejudgment, prejudice, same root word there. it was something I was uncomfortable with for two reasons. Uncomfortable, one, because of what I just said. It was like, oh, I don't want to get into that. But uncomfortable, two, because I don't like feeling uncomfortable. So I was uncomfortable about being uncomfortable about this music. And it took kind of a desire to want to break through that, and a curiosity of what the truth was, because, we should all believe in ourselves, but we shouldn't always trust ourselves, because, we need to be able to question even our own preconceptions. And, wanting to know more about a different kind of music, for me to open myself up to listen to this stuff and find out if I was right about that or wrong, and a few months ago, I did a podcast on a Lynyrd Skynyrd album that I had, and I made mention of the fact of this same fact more briefly, in that they were known as kind of the good old boys type thing, partly because at the time they were using the Confederate flag, which they have later said they regretted and have disavowed and all that stuff. And that's because, and I learned this partly from an awesome documentary on Skynyrd that I watched. They were actually pretty damn inclusive and awesome and liberal folks who were not really into guns and all of that thing. And if you are, it's not a criticism. I'm just saying that notion that they were kind of these hard-ass good old boys with strictly conservative values who had a tinge of racism was just not true. And not to mention the music itself is awesome in so many ways. That, I think, can be said for a lot of both Southern rock music and country music in general. Now, in recent days, there were a couple of people in the country world who have certainly come out as, conservative in some way, whether it has to do with the recent election or the pandemic and all of that stuff, and that's fine, but there are as many, if not more, country and Southern rock artists who fall on the other side of the aisle. And what's important about that is it busts through prejudices, it busts through preconceptions. And listen, let me tell you, liberals like me can have as many preconceptions as conservatives and anybody else can. Just usually heading in a different direction, although not always. And like I said, it's important to want to question those things. And so having questioned it, I found, again, that there's a strain, I think, in pretty much any kind of music, where you have kind of the liberal side, the conservative side, and the people who fall in the middle who are not political. And we've seen that even with the election, with certain hip-hop artists coming out for Republicans and other hip-hop artists coming out for Democrats and the whole thing. So even then, people think of hip-hop and they're like, oh, everybody there is of one color, stripe, so vein, politically or socially. Not true, right? And feel how you want about that. You can discuss that with me after, put it in your comments, and we can talk more about that if you want. That's really kind of not what this is about. What this is about is the whole point of the title, which is why Southern rock might just be ideal America. And my little quip on the card at the front, little feet will save us all. They won't. But the point being, Southern rock is kind of the nexus of a lot of styles of music. And yeah, you can say that about a lot of music, but in this in particular, it's a giant umbrella, Southern rock, in that, looking at my notes, it has that, it's down home enough to feel traditional and familiar and comforting, and it has the countrified tinge and the pretty usually standard instrumentation, things like that, but it's eclectic and inclusive enough to put in there things like rock and blues and country and folk and pop, sometimes even jazz, certainly with these dudes, and heavy metal, and tinges of it, and people like ZZ Top and so the harder Skynyrd songs and things like that. And in this case, in the case of Little Feat, it even has that New Orleans swampiness, that swamp rock feel, that kind of that feel it in your gut rolling around in there. It just feels like it's just yummy. It's like a gumbo. So, and this music is like a gumbo. And to me, what that shows is that you can have music that is considered stereotypically on one side of the social aisle or another, come together and create this other kind of music that includes it all. You know, I watched this show recently that was talking about how America is not all one side or all another, and that each of us on the sides have to face the fact that we're both of us are America. And to me, why I say this is ideal America is because ideally, those sides, whether you agree or disagree, find a way to come together, find ways to come together, find those moments and instances when you can come together, when you can converge and create something that is more American than anything that happens strictly on one side or strictly on the other side. And that's my argument for why I think, you know, Southern rock might be ideal America. And again, I'm not, you know, hugely knowledgeable about it. I know about, like I said, its germination there in the 70s, and how it came up in through the 80s, and you know, and Bob Seger and Georgia Satellites, and in the 90s with what was it, the Black Crows, I think you can consider, and all that stuff, and Drive-By Truckers. I don't know when they started. See, I don't know. You know, My Morning Jacket and the Kings of Leon and Alabama Shakes are more recent ones and things. That's about as far as my knowledge goes of that. And but I do believe my argument here, and I'd like to know what you think about it. And you know, I ask you a lot of questions, so I want you to answer them. But it's because, like I said, I was brought up in kind of that pop, jazz, blues, musical theater, and rock world, and electronic world also, and hip hop and electronic music were huge in my childhood. But you can hear some strains of this in some of the music that I do. I've done some folky music, which doesn't count. I've done a couple of straight up country things, again, doesn't count because it's not Southern rock. But a recent song of mine off of my band Rex EP Symphony for the Weird, which was done in collaboration with the band America UK, called No Way Out for Me, really illustrates, I think, that more kind of bluesy Southern rock feel. And as always, I put a link at the bottom there for you to check out and see what you think. And of course, I have the links to these two albums as well, information for them. And that's my story this week. Do you know Little Feat? Do you know anything? Do you know Dixie Chicken? Great frickin' song. Do you know they worked with Linda Ronstadt for a while and things like that? And do you know more than I do about Little Feat? Do you like them? Have you ever been in the Southern rock at all? If so, is it older bands from the 70s or 80s, or is it newer bands from more recent decades? Do you stay away from it because you think it's for hicks? Is that not your thing, or have you gotten past that? Is there other music that you've gotten into that initially you were like, I'm not sure I would like that, I have prejudices against it, but then I opened my mind to it and wow, it's awesome? Is there some other kind of music other than Southern rock or Southern rock? Is there something non-musical in your life that you feel that happened to you where you're like, oh, I had a real bias against such and such, and then I opened my mind to it, bam, you know? I want to know what you think about all of this, or whether you agree, disagree, love, or hate anything that's happening here. Because as always, my objectives are music, conversation, and connection. Thank you for listening, for watching, for reading, for clicking, for sharing, for subscribing, for checking out my Patreon page, patreon.com. Music is not a genre. And until next time, I'll see you.